Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Raad Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2011 action drama movie titled Conan the Barbarian. This is, of course, a reboot from the 1982 John Milius directed Arnold Schwarzenegger starring Conan. Only this time we have the reboot from 2011. Alright, the runtime of this movie is 1 hour and 52 minutes long. It is directed by Marcus Nispel. It is produced by Frederick Malmberg, A.V. Lerner, Boaz Davidson, Joe Gatta, George Furla, John Baldecki, and Les Weldon. The script was written by Thomas Dean Donnelly, Joshua Oppenheimer, and Sean Hood. And it is, of course, based off of the characters by pulp writer Robert E. Howard. It is composed by Tyler Bates, the cinematography by Thomas Kloss, and it was edited by Ken Blackwell. And the stars of the movie are Jason Momoa, Rachel Nichols, Stephen Lang, Ron Perlman, Rose McGowan, Syed Taghmaoui, Bob Sapp, Diane Lubenova, Nonso Anozie, Milton Welsh, Rawi, Anton Trendfailov, Ayson Aptulova, Daniel Rashev, Gisella Marengo, Morgan Freeman, Lailla Rouass, and Alina Puscau. Now, the original 1982 adaptation of Conan the Barbarian, directed by John Milius and starred Arnold Schwarzenegger, was definitely based off of the stories from Robert E. Howard, which featured a provocative sword and sorcery fantasy adventure that launched the acting career of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It put him on the map towards stardom. I mean, this also, of course, predates The Terminator. It had a ruthless villain in Thulsa Doom, performed by James Earl Jones, and it had a great love interest for Conan, performed by Sandel Bergman. But this newer version of Conan the Barbarian was still a far cry from its predecessor, and it is practically due to the lack of storytelling and decides to go out of its way by entertaining us with blood, carnage, half-naked women, and nothing else more. Now people are wondering, isn't that what its intentions were? Well, yes. Yes, its intentions were to feature a lot of fighting. I mean, come on, this is set in the era of barbarians, where fighting was compulsory. It was all part of their program. Being a barbarian means, getting into a lot of fights, engaging into a lot of lot of bloodshed. Yeah, I was going to get to it. A lot of fighting. There's going to be, I mean, this is a sword and sorcery film. There's going to be a lot of war. There's going to be a lot of death. There's going to be a massive body count. You'll probably see bodies piling on top of each other, raised up higher than Mount Kilimanjaro. You might probably see all of that stuff and more. Perfectly understandable. And then you're wondering, why is it such a bad thing? Well, it's because that's mostly what you get out of this movie. There really is not. It really is a bit of a lazy. There's a very, very lazy, thin script where the characters never really ever, interact with the fans, with the audience. Because you can never really get in depth with character development, with decent storytelling, and that's all you get. All you get is just entertainment. What you need is some storytelling. You need some drama. You need something for us to get invested in. We need at least a character to guide us through. And I'm not saying it's the fault of the performers. They do give it their all. But it's just that the script is the big red herring because it doesn't give us that much storytelling to keep us intrigued. All it is just war and everything and nothing else. It felt more like a 300 movie than a Conan movie, but at least in 300 you have a storytelling. You have a story told. You have characters that you could get invested in. And you also have a nice leading performance from Gerard Butler, who actually is a character that you could get invested in. It's a story of, the Spartans against the Athenians, and how even though the Athenians outnumber the Spartans can still, put up a good fight, even when their army is way smaller, but they are like 10 times stronger than the Athenians and can take them down much more easily in spite of their small army. I mean, they would have basically like 300 people for the Spartans, and you would have something like thousands of people for the Athenians. But the Spartans and the Athenians can but the Spartans can actually outmuscle and outsmart and outbeat the Athenians, even in spite of the fact that they have a larger army and more advanced weaponry. And you find that in that story. That is what differs 300 from this Conan the Barbarian reboot. This gives me the impression that the filmmakers were not interested in drawing a stimulating narrative and instead felt more interested in delivering violent gore, as if to say we're too dumb or too restless to follow a developing story and just unleash the bloody splatters for our entertainment. I mean, what gives? You just can't just dumb us down. We need something to be invested in. We don't get that here. The sad part was that the opening scenes show a lot of promise. In fact, the opening scenes are probably some of the best. But I'm just disappointed that the rest of the movie did not follow up after that. So after an engaging battle that involves Conan's father, Corin, played by Ron Perlman, we see him perform a Caesarean strangely while in the midst of battle. Oh yeah, sure. Your whole crew, your whole team is depending on you, and then you decide to stop and do a C-section on somebody. Okay, maybe it's not just somebody, it's your wife. She's pregnant, she's having a baby, and she's also dying while in the process of making your baby. But it's still, it's kind of a bit inconvenient that you're in the midst of a battle, but then you have to drop your sword to perform a cesarean section on your wife. I mean, okay, it's perfectly understandable that she's having your child, but it's just so abrupt and so inconvenient that I don't know whether I'm grossed out, flabbergasted, or just plain angry that you're doing this. Okay, it's your wife. I understand. Congratulations, Poppy. You're having a child. But then there's a lot of other people's lives are at stake. And you decide to stop for a cesarean section like you're taking a coffee break. So, that's weird. Okay, yes, I understand it's your wife. I guess we won't be celebrating with cigars anytime soon. Not to say that it's smoking. Never mind playing the champagne battles. You got a fight, you got a battle to go to. Your crew is depending on you. After all, you're a barbarian. You have to go. Your war comes like all part for the course. So as his wife is dying, she tells her husband to name her son Conan. So then the next few scenes, we feature a young Conan, played by Leo Howard, who I have to say, he is amazing. Even though he's only on for a few scenes, this kid really, really knows his his ways around battle scenes. I mean, I tell you, if this kid keeps up, he could probably end up finding a future in the stunt department in Hollywood. So, if fighting skills are your thing, young man, Hollywood should sign you up for more stuff like that, especially with stunts. We could really use someone like you. And maybe not necessarily green screen either. So we see a young Conan, played by Leo Howard, training in combat, and like I said before, he just seems so natural at it. Though he lacks the discipline and the expectations from his father, who dishes out the toughest love towards Conan. But then again, that's the life of of being a barbarian. You're just because your father is like an almighty leader doesn't mean that you just sit around doing shit all.
Jesus, what was that? Somebody knocked at the back?
Conan successfully, decimates
I heard a noise.
an entire squadron of creatures without breaking much of a sweat. Unfortunately, Corin, his father, is killed at the hands of a diabolical warlord who goes by the name of Kalar Zim, played by Stephen Lang, who I got to actually say Stephen Lang was just awesome. I know he's kind of built a bit of a history playing villain characters, but I tell you, Stephen Lang is truly, truly an amazing performer here, and his role as Kalar Zim is probably easily the best performance in this movie. His intentions are to search for the missing pieces of the Mask of Acheron in order to bring his dead wife back to life and to take over the land of Hyboria. So instead of seeing a sordid sorcery adventure story, this is just another one of these plots for revenge story. Oh, great. Another revenge story. Like we've seen them all. So, with the assistance from his wicked sorceress daughter, Marique, played by Rose McGowan, Kalar needs the blood of a virgin lady who is willing to sacrifice herself while he puts the pieces of the mask together. So then we cut to older Conan, played by Jason Momoa, and he has grown up to become a cunning warrior, and eventually finds that rare virgin woman named Tamara, played by Rachel Nichols, and they seem to be sort of standoffish at first, because of the whole strong, independent woman trope that seems to be a frequent trope in the Hollywood industry. Like, I don't need a man to back me up. I can defend myself type of persona. But then, they eventually soften up with each other and eventually they engage in intercourse. Excuse me for just a second. Yes, I know I tend to be contradictory to my parents, but I also have to be but I'm not just contradictory to them, I'm contradictory towards everyone around me. This is just who I am as a person. But if Conan and Tamara are engaging in intercourse, that does not make her a virgin anymore. So, does that make her ineligible? I mean, in order to put the pieces of the mask together, a virgin lady has to sacrifice herself. While if she's losing her virginity to Conan, then she's no longer a virgin. So she's not conventionally eligible anymore. Enough said? Or maybe that was his purpose. By having intercourse with her, now she doesn't have to fall into the wrath of Kalar's Zim. So sorry, Kalar. Your attempts to resurrect your dead wife will just have to go to someone else. Good luck. Okay. Let's talk a little more about the technical set pieces. The original 1982 version of Conan the Barbarian was almost to perfection. You had intriguing props like the Wheel of Pain, the Tree of Woe, and the palace where Thulsa Doom resides, which fit the time period of the movie flawlessly. But the 2011 remake lacks the appeal of its locations, mainly due to the poor editing, as Conan's journey from one locale to another tends to be too frequent and underdeveloped. It's like you may be traveling in a journey to from one place to another, but in the end, it still looks like the same place he's been originally. There's lack of imagination. There's lack of creativity in finding new developments when it comes to locality. It's like, okay, so he's in one side of the forest, and he's in the other side of the forest, and there's really nothing much there to see or to talk about. So it's like you're on one piece of land, you're on another piece of land, and there's nothing more to it. There's no creativity. At least the 1982 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, there was that in terms of technicality. And I'm not just saying it because I'm being pro-nostalgic bias and because I'm a Generation Xer. I would probably rather watch something around my time period of my childhood. But that's not the case at all. I'm just pointing out the facts. I mean, if you want to try to cater to millennials, at least show them like some level of gumption. You don't find that in this movie compared to the 82 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. The awkward camera work and choppy scene changes tend to meander all over the place. Yes, the camera work. I mean, okay, maybe they didn't overdo it with the whole shaky cam stuff, but the fight scenes and some of the major death scenes seem to often appear off camera than they are on camera, and that just, upsets the apple cart here. And while the fight scenes in Conan's youth are engaging at best, yeah, okay, they are pretty well choreographed. The warriors that looked like they were chiseled from rock seemed easily breakable, like minute flashes that run the course of the movie. It's like you're looking at these CGI graphic monsters, and they all seem to be pretty easy to beat. You see the other like soldiers and combatants and all these other essential characters. It's like it's like it's like there's really no challenge to them. I mean, I'm sure if I dropped my pinky finger on their chest, they'd fall to their deaths. Wait, would that make me a barbarian? Eh, c'est la guerre. Physically, Jason Momoa was perfect for the role of Conan, like the way that it was intended to be taken from the novel by pulp writer Robert E. Howard. I mean, he just looked the part. In fact, I will even say he physically looked the part more than compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And though his character is a man of a few words, he does deliver a line that perfectly defines his intentions of being a fierce barbarian. I live, I love, I slay, and I am content. Now, just because Momoa physically looks better than Conan doesn't mean that he is better than Arnold. I still think Arnold Schwarzenegger is 10 times better as Conan than Momoa. Momoa may look physically, but when it comes to action and when it comes to the fight scenes and maybe the character, you gotta hand it to Arnold on that. One is by how they look, and one is by how they act and perform, and Arnold is still better. I mean, Arnold definitely used humor to add depth to the character, which is always a nice thing. And his incredible physique and brutal strength made him easily an untouchable warrior that would have any adversary trembling in their sandals. Jason Momoa, on the other hand, he's pretty much stoic most of the time. Maybe it was because they wanted to make him more believable by playing it safe and not having him be, a humored individual. Maybe because they didn't want to make him as a parody. But then again, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan the Barbarian wasn't played for parody. Arnold Schwarzenegger uses organically planned one-liners. Jason Momoa, he doesn't really can possess the one-liners effectively like the way Arnold did. And no, it's not because, hey, Arnold has that funny accent. No. I mean, Jason Momoa has an accent too, being that he is of Islander descent. So he's got, he's got that kind of accent, bro. You know, because he is of Samoan descent. Hell, come to think of it, if you ever seen Aquaman, Jason Momoa bears a very, very striking resemblance to WWE wrestler Roman Reigns. By God, the identities between those two are very similar. I sort of tell you that if Jason Momoa would not play Aquaman, the next person in line would be Roman Reigns. That's how I mean, you've ever looked at the 2018 Aquaman, you would say, that's Jason Momoa? For a moment, I thought that was Roman Reigns. Because the resemblance is almost uncanny. And this is not just because I'm saying that because they're both Samoans, but it's because they do look alike. The long hair, the beard, and the intense look in their eyes and the physique, and maybe even the Islander tattoos. Just Google in Jason Momoa and Roman Reigns and juxtapose their pictures together, and you'll understand what I'm saying. As for the villain, Stephen Lang's Kalar Zim was a formidable opponent for Conan. Like I said, he turns in the best performance in this movie. Sometimes not always the hero turns in the best performance. Sometimes you gotta look at the villain. And I gotta say, he was just as effective as a villain as James Earl Jones's character, Thulsa Doom, was in the 82 Conan. I just had this moment of, but still, there was a little bit of a weakness. I had a little bit of some unsettlement with his semi-incestuous relationship he had with his vile daughter, Marique. Yeah, that was a little bit disturbing. But I did kind of see that in him. But maybe it's an understanding because his daughter kind of probably bears a striking resemblance to his late wife. So I could probably see. So I guess he probably sees a lot of his dead wife through his daughter. But I still find that a little bit unsettling. The real low point of this version of Conan, this reboot, was that there wasn't very much in terms of excitement. Sure, there were tons of brutal moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat, but it really doesn't amount to anything other than to segue onto the next and even more brutal, bloody fight. And maybe, and maybe because I think there were talk about a potential sequel, but because it took $90 million to make the movie, unfortunately, it really flopped badly at the box office. I mean, just think about it. It cost $90 million to make, but on opening night, it only made 20 million. That's bad. In other words, they lost very badly. A 90 million budget and only made 20 million at the box office. That's not very good. So the ideas of a sequel, not likely to happen. See, what this movie really lacks in is heart, soul, or effort to inject decent storytelling that's desperately needed for a movie like this. It felt to me like a mindless video game, and even video games have better storytelling than this. So this is where its weaknesses comes in. Script was pretty bad. I'm not saying the direction was bad. I mean, it was told in a linear fashion, so there's really no mass confusions of anything of that sort. I just think that it could have been a whole lot better. Jason Momoa may physically look like Conan, but he just doesn't have the appeal or the charisma. There's a lot of meandering in the plot. Maybe the only real standout performance really was by Stephen Lang. The romance relationship between Conan and Tamara was pretty much, virtually just plastered on with no real intentions or purpose. There's just a lot of awkward moments too, like like a guy stopping his combat just to perform a cesarean section on his dying wife, just so that she could give birth to his next generation. Almost like, okay, guys, you keep fighting while I'll take my coffee break. No. I mean, he performing a cesarean section like he's taking a coffee break. It's that kind of came across as being a bit ridiculous, albeit a little bit funny, but it's not really that funny because uh, apparently Conan will be raised without a mommy. Anyhow, and the story kind of like just got bogged down from a sword and sorcery adventure story to a revenge plot, which is lazy and wanton. I mean, there could have been a lot that could have been done to make this movie better. It had potential. It had the set pieces. It just needed better scripting, better editing, better quality, and maybe even more heart put into the story. That could have made everything a whole lot better. So therefore, when all this is said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Conan the Barbarian from 2011 a 5. So,
Lord.
so I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.